get, hey, Afghans haven't been involved in these terrorist attacks in the United States over the years, so they're not a threat. It's like, no, their passport used to be super weak. It was very, very difficult for Afghan to get a visa and come to the United States. Right now, it's so easy. They get a tourist or humanitarian visa somewhere in Latin America, and they come straight up, right? So the threat landscape has changed because the freedom of movement for some of these people, right? Be it the Indians, Syrians, Chinese, gosh, there's so many Africans seeding their way into the pipelines in the United States, right? This freedom of movement has changed that calculus.
And you say the Africans, is that a threat in your opinion?
Yeah, well, the thing is with the Afghans, right, there's the good guys we want to bring in, and then unfortunately a lot of the bad guys got in. So I think they're a threat to our country, and then they're, of course, a threat to our allies, as I've brought up some of the examples as to why. Yeah. And remember, a lot of these Afghans are well-trained too, so that's another thing you got to keep in mind. We should be most concerned about persons coming from the locations where they actually have had quality training, right? Because they are going to be the biggest threat here in the United States. And I think that's why even people worry about things like the Chinese, right? Like, hey, have these men been through military training, right? That is important. That's an important piece of the calculus.
Yeah, and then you mentioned to Africa, there's been several operations from special operations out in Africa trying to dismantle some of the ISIS training camps that are out there as well. And so that makes Africa part of the concern as well, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, and in Africa, there's been wars going on for years. I mean, children go to training camps in Africa, right? I mean, and they're highly trained there, too. And remember, in the United States, there aren't that many people trained. I know that sounds really bad, right? But we have a very small percentage of our country who served in the military. We have a very small percentage of our country compared to some of these places. Like some countries, it's a forced mandatory military training, right? So, we need to keep that in mind too. Don't just, look at a book and be like, oh, he looks fine when he could have been in special operations. There was actually a very senior ISIS leader. He had been the head of special operations for his government's military in Tajikistan, right? He ended up joining ISIS and was one of the best commanders, right? A number of our Benghazi attackers had spent time, in their military before joining a terrorist group. And we see that all the time, in the Pakistan region as well. Like even people serve their entire career and then they don't really know what to do after and they join a terrorist group. So it's very dangerous.
Absolutely. Biden just passed a bill that's going to ban anyone trying to attempt to come into the country illegally and seek asylum. I think this is a good effort. I question why it came so late, but do you feel like this is a good step that's going to protect our country a little bit better?
I mean, it's going to help. I mean, he bans it after 2,500, right? So you can't get in today, you get in tomorrow. You can't get in tomorrow, you get in the day after. So it's not going to leave the people out who are willing to get in. It's definitely not going to leave the people out who are getting in other ways and not even processing through some sort of checkpoint situation, and it'll just make those pathways obviously more viable. I think it's important, though. I think this is very beneficial to the people serving on the border, right? Because it limits at least the number of people they have to process, right? And maybe they can start to catch up. I don't know if they're ever going to be able to catch up with like 7 to 10 million people coming in the last couple of years. But, people have been asking for this. The thing is, he reversed so many policies. This is now, oh my gosh, this is the second most important topic to American voters. So now we have to do something about it. And unfortunately, it's just politicking.
What's the first? What you said is the second biggest conversation?
Economy.
The economy.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's timely. I think it's kind of if he's trying to please the American people, it's the right time to do it, because it's such a big conversation. Personally, it's nice to see something. I know right. For the political side of it, the game, it sucks, but I'm glad there's something being put in place to kind of slow down a little bit. Right. I think it's going to cause a bigger influx. I think you're going to see some new news reports about massive amounts of migrants at the borders waiting for their time,
Right.
which is going to cause, the next wave of issues. And with that massive influx that's waiting on the other side, there's probably going to be moments of what we've seen is just just a flood the borders, overwhelm the border patrol in a kind of free for all. And so, there's every action kind of has a reaction. And I think that's what that's going to cause. And
Yeah, I
especially,
agree.
I think the night before the election is going to be one of those crazy nights on the border. I'm hoping to be on the border when that happens, because I think it's going to be, if Trump wins, we're all stuck. So they're going to just kind of, it's almost like
Yeah.
the changeover of Title 42 again,
Well,
thoughts.
even the last few years have been that way. People like, let's just get in while we can, right? I mean, even the
Yeah.
terrorists are like, let's seed in people now while we can, right? We'll deal with it later. But yeah, this is the time to get people in, and everyone knows it, unfortunately. So the influx is going to continue, even if with an arbitrary number at the border.
Crazy. Well, Sarah, I honestly appreciate your time. Is there any last thoughts you want to leave for the audience? You're more than welcome to.
No, I mean, I just appreciate you having me on. I think, it's important for Americans to understand the national security component of this. I think like everything becomes so political, right? It's like, oh, I don't want to speak out against the border, or oh, I'm only focused on the border, right? Because of the politics of it. But screw the politicians, right? They're keeping this broken on both sides, right, to benefit their own political gains. And it's something we need to stop letting them do. And we need to start voting people out who aren't dealing with our national security concerns.
Yeah, I think too many people sometimes don't know that we have to focus both sides, right? Both have to be met equally, and not just the humanitarian mission. We really have to think about the longevity of this country and the safety of this country in the future. And almost everyone, if you talk to them, they might say, yeah, humanitarian. But then if you ask them the question, do you want your kids safe? And they say yes. Okay, well, then you have to also think about homeland security. And so for some reason, it gets looked over too easily. And I think this podcast is absolutely fucking terrifying. And I appreciate it. I appreciate you giving us your experience, your knowledge, your thoughts from your background